just a little bit of a pull down. And it pulled every other day, pull down.
Mm-hmm.
Bad boss, bad leader, pull down.
Yeah.
And you starting to destabilize your foundations, the things that really you believed in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So all of a sudden anxiety came crashing in. I'm fetal position in a couch. I can't eat. I'm vomiting in the morning.
Yeah.
Wife will come home. Thank God. Just her touch, her voice, just calm me. Thank God I had that.
Yeah.
And what I had to do, which is my favorite and the thing I appreciate the most about the emotional struggle, is what I use, and I found out I've been using this since I was a boy. I didn't come up with necessarily the greatest upbringing. It was rough. I have this visualization. You're buried alive. That's anxiety.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
And what you have to do to get out of it is you have to scratch your fingernail 1 inch at a time and create one step until you create the next step. And that's how I visualize getting out of the pit until you scoop until it's a step, until you're scooping until it's a step, until you're stepping out, until eventually you step onto the surface again. So I thought once I overcame and understood that version of anxiety that it was all over. I thought it was gone. No.
Good evening, and we want to welcome you to our coffee talk this evening. And we've been trying to put some really interesting programs together for you to touch base with us on a personal level, where you can dialogue with us and where we give you tools to help you through navigating through life. And this evening we have a special guest, Chris Bayerle, and he's been a friend of mine for a number of years. He's also served in the military and has a lot of things to share from that perspective too. And one of the things, Chris, welcome to the program.
Thanks for
and one of the things that we like to do on our program is really give people some real life stuff that we work through. And I think a lot of times, I don't know if you can attest to that, but especially when you run into people and especially going through the stuff that we go through, a lot of times people just don't have the tools to navigate through some of the difficulties that they're facing. And sometimes it can be very traumatic, and sometimes it can be very difficult for people to deal with some emotions and different things that they go through. And so I thought it'd be great for us to sit down and just chat a little bit about us getting, just to talk about some of those things of how we've navigated through life. And you've gone through a lot of stuff, and we've had chats back and forth too. And some of the stuff I've had to navigate through, and I've just really appreciated the time that we've had to talk and work through some of that stuff. And that's why I thought it'd be great to have you on the program, because I believe that there are some tools that you've navigated through, and sometimes it's not a matter of learning to do it this way. Sometimes it's by trial and error, and sometimes it's not even understanding, but then figuring it out and realizing, and so that's one of the great things about a medium like this, is we allow that discussion to happen and allow people to interact with that too. And the nice thing about social media is people can look at it over and over again, highlight some points, and so so why don't we start talking about just general life stuff. And so I know you're married and you have a baby on the way.
I do.
And congratulations for that. That is exciting. That's your first one.
Yeah, I don't know what to make out of it. I'm trying. I'm trying.
I know.
It's good. It is really good. And the happier she is, the easier it is for me.
Absolutely.
So, the little bit you do in the beginning.
Oh, yes.
35 seconds of your life to really make it work. And so I just feel like I've never felt more obligated to ensure that she's happy, healthy.
Yes.
Than I do now.
It's amazing what changes in a person's life. Once marriage is one thing, and
it's a huge.
It's a major shift in your life. But then all of a sudden you're expecting your own child, and it's like that's another whole aspect to navigate through and work through that kind of stuff too.
How many kids do you have?
We have 3 kids. Yeah.
So
we have 3, and then we got 5 grandkids too. So that adds another dynamic to stuff like that too.
That's the bonus.
Yeah, there you go. That's like you get to send them home after. Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. In the beginning of it, I felt like I was just in complete denial. Like, she presented it to me, and I'm like, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
And it's this big running joke because I'm so like sensitive towards my wife and so protective.
Yeah.
And she presented that she was pregnant, and I was like, oh, we'll talk about it after at work. Or something just horrible. And I didn't know what to do with it at first. And we've been trying, and we're working. It didn't take too long, a couple of months. And she was just so ecstatic that I felt like I was on the ride. You know, I was just following her a little bit. And, you know, she really goes through quite a bit of a journey, but her pregnancy and her whole thing has just been healthy. Really great for her.
Which is that's what you want at the end of the day, is you want it to be the experience, you want it to be the best, and it's always good that it works out that way. And it doesn't sometimes for some people, and they have to navigate through a lot of hurdles. And I think life in itself carries a lot of hurdles and different things like that. And you and I have talked about it before, how sometimes we've had to navigate some pretty high mountains in our own life, dealing with stuff, whether it was military related experiences that we've gone through, things like that. But I think a lot of times people can relate to us pushing through some of that stuff and learning how to protect ourselves and to know the signs of maybe we're going down a road we shouldn't be going, and how to make that adjustment. And I think sometimes people find it very tough to make those adjustments. And so I'd like to talk about a little bit of some of those hurdles and how you've learned to navigate through, because I know it's just really healthy stuff that we can leave. I kind of titled this idea that we wanted to talk about is how to have healthy emotions, because all of us have emotions and all of us experience and deal with things differently, but to have a healthy aspect to our emotions. Because I've said this many times, even when my wife and I have been sat in the studio here and talked about how emotions are not bad. No. It's how we navigate, how we allow those emotions to control us, and how we navigate through them. And so I'd like to talk about that just a little bit, and just talk about how maybe some of the hurdles that you went through and what you've learned through some of those experiences, and just to help our listeners to maybe relate to some of, maybe not as extreme at times, but relate, knowing how to navigate through some of that stuff. I think it's really healthy.
I actually use I know it's hard for a lot of people, a lot of civilians, anybody really. I know it's hard, and even us, I call it like detuned, like you and I.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you mean.
People that come from a little bit more of an extreme world and how they navigate their emotions. Yep. I've found that ourselves, all the tools, all the experience that we've had can be such a great asset, but it can be sometimes our greatest detriment.
Absolutely.
You know, so when I deal with quite a few individuals regularly, pretty much on a weekly basis, I get a text.
I know I've texted you one time at about 12:30 at night saying, hey, is this normal for me to deal with this? Because some things triggered from my past, and it was like something's happening to me and I don't understand that, because so
I've been really into the darker side, I guess, the harder side, not darker necessarily, it's like the underlayer emotions lately. Yep. So the one I've been chasing around right now is shame.
Oh yes. Yeah. Which is huge.
It's a big one.
Which is huge.
Nobody talks about it anymore.
No, because
it's on the wayside.
Yep, absolutely.
And like you were talking about.
And that's sometimes what happens. People aren't willing to talk about this, and that's what this helps. We're talking about it where people say it's okay.
Yeah, be shameful. I think shame, like anxiety, actually, and anxiety's been such a plague for the world over the last decade or so, even longer for a lot of people. And, you know, for some of us, we used to think that anxiety, depression was even a myth at some point in time. Sure. Just never understood it, you know? And you and I are actually fairly sensitive dudes, and we were even willing to express that sensitivity, but to ourselves, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, absolutely it is, yep.
But the shame one, I recently had helped out with somebody. You said you're using social media as a positive, right?
Yes.
And it's so few and far between these days. And friends, a really good younger sister of mine shared a story that she wasn't so proud of. Shared a photo, and I was like, she'd blocked me on it. And of course, there's 16 people around me who end up sending me text messages like, did you see what she put up there? So I get this photo, and I'm like, and immediately she's very much like a little sister to me. I just got infuriated for just a second. Mm-hmm. Then I came right down, and I'm like, right, she's old enough, so on and so forth. Yeah. It's not my responsibility, not my person. But what I did was I addressed her on it. So I came up to her a few days later, and I was like, how do you block somebody on Snapchat? And she's like, starts going through the explanation. Well, you got to go through settings and click on the
and she's walked into it.
She figured it out, and I'm like, why'd you block me? And she's like, got flustered, started tearing up a little bit. I'm like, it's okay, just tell me, just hold. Like, something I found that's hard with emotions is we are emotional. Like,
we're created that way.
Humans,
absolutely, it's part of our natural makeup. Absolutely.
But how I've been brought in was to discipline your emotions, which is an awesome tool,
but also not.
That's right, and it's such a double-edged sword all the time. So, with this story, she got flustered, she got red in the face, she started tearing up a little bit, and she's like, I didn't want to share it because I was scared of what you thought. And I'm like, but you're a strong, independent woman. I'm like, so what do you want to be? Do you want to be proud of what you are and who you are? Then rock that.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what I think. That's what you need to learn.
See, that's huge.
Or
that's huge.
If you feel ashamed of it, then it's probably something you're doing wrong. That's humility. That's conscience. You should be shameful of it. If you feel that the action was that, then now you know that was a mistake. I'm like, so which is it? I don't need that answer right now. I just want you to really sit on that. So next time when something that comes up, because these days, right, you could, those consequences of what you
absolutely.
Right? And she wants to be something huge one day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, just think about this as you go. And it's hard to be wise when you're young, and it's hard to know how to navigate your emotions. Yeah. So that's everybody's responsibility. I call it the social contract. From
I like what you just said there. It's everybody's responsibility, because this is the trap that oftentimes we can fall into. We blame other people for our emotions.
That's right.
Well, if they wouldn't have said that, if they wouldn't have done that, then you wouldn't got a reaction out of me.
That's right.
But when we take responsibility, and that's the big thing for me, because for so long I could bury that. It's everybody else's fault because I'm put together. Yeah. I'm strong. I'm hard. I'm all these things. I'm not any of those things that people say I need to be. And so I could always pass the responsibility onto the people. And I think this is part of freedom, finding freedom in myself, is recognizing I take responsibility for more actions. Yes, someone can do something to us. Yeah. We can have an experience. Something can happen outside of our control, put us in a situation where normally we'd have to process anyway. And yet, if we don't take responsibility, I think that's where we start going downhill.
That's right.
In the sense of how even our own health is concerned, emotionally, mentally, spiritually is another big one.
The big three.
Yeah, absolutely. Those three are key, and a lot of times we don't want to recognize that, but that's a powerful understanding, to become responsible for my own reaction to stuff. I can't change you. I can't change the next person. I can only change me. And so if I want to have healthy emotions and healthy responses to stuff, that's my responsibility. I have to learn to take ownership.
Yeah,
and that's the battle sometimes, because we don't want to take ownership.
That's right.
We want to blame.
I think ego and pride really get in there, and it takes so long for us to establish ourselves as individuals. I find that a lot. Like, I'm coaching a young man right now, just turned 20. And I don't always deal with like youth. There just seems to be that there's an impact there, or people seek guidance, and that's just how it is. But he tends to lean on me as if I'm to blame for his feeling of inadequacy or whatever that is. Yeah. So I keep trying to share with him that how he feels and what he does is irrelevant to me, not out of disrespect, but it's him as an individual. I don't know if it's now or if it's always been like this. We always talk about accountability, and we're big individuals of like maximum accountability.
Yeah, that's right.
It's always your fault. No one's coming to save you.
That's right.
It's always that. And I've been busted quite a few times saying that.
Yeah.
Right? But that's completely contradictory to the previous statement of it's everyone's responsibility. So with my friends, I play a lot of social experiment. I call social contracting.
Yep.
Your friend does something horrible, or is going to do something horrible. Is that your responsibility or not? So no, it's not inherently your responsibility. However, I find it hard for people to have the courage to help their friends or family and just address them. It feels like an inconvenience to you or I maybe to say something like, hey, Jeff, I don't think it's a good idea for you to do hard drugs.
Yep.
Hey, bud, maybe not the best idea. You shouldn't probably do that, right? But a lot of people have just that issue, just stepping through what you had said, like addressing it, working through that. I call it like steering into the wave. A lot of like pontoon aqua, a lot of marine operations.
Yep.
So when you turn into that wave, steer into that wave, right? The idea is that you're going to cut that wave and climb that tidal, right?
Yep.
Trying to climb that breach.
And oftentimes in life, we want to avoid those moments, right? And we turn and we hit them sideways, and then we go sideways.
Yep, that's right. Rolls right up our back.
Yep.
You know, so I go through that with my wife a little bit too, because naturally she's just sweet and peaceful and just avoids conflict like the plague. And I'm the exact opposite. I want to steer into every storm.
I like how you say that, because sometimes you're trying to picture the right words to use, because fear does the opposite. Fear gets us to turn away.
Right.
And then we get it from the side, we get it from the back, and all kinds of stuff. I don't know if it's a natural tendency or if it's something that something we have to learn, but we have to be okay with facing it head on. I think sometimes that's the problem. We don't want to face it, because by facing it, then we have decisions to make.
That's right.
And either way,
I think it catches you. So this is where I try to figure it out. Because not all the stuff we do, not everything I do is like executed perfectly emotionally. And
that's important not to say that, though, because many times we think we have to have it right the first time. And it's not about being right the first time. It's about learning to navigate, learning to make the decisions and go after it.
Anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
That one taught me that lesson hard, right? Like I was still relatively young as I went in after university, and I was young as I came out of it, but I'd executed everything at such a high level so consistently and so on, you know. I don't remember a failed mission, you know, like that's 79 operations, you know, combat missions.
Yeah.
I don't remember failing any of them. And so you come out of that not only with an ego and an invincibility complex, but you're staged, like you feel like you're set up.
Yeah.
So you move into the next step of life, or even if you stayed in, or you're doing whatever, your next job, right? Everything you do, you think you're set up for it. And we're so bad at evolution and change, you know. I don't know if it's just animalistic by nature, or a really great quote I heard a while ago with our current like political climate and our current time with like dealing with COVID, was humans are a race of short memory. And they just keep forgetting. Like one generation goes and you just completely forget what happened to the generation before you, because we're just so naturally arrogant, ignorant, or scared.
I'm glad you're not afraid of those words, because sometimes a person likes to sensitize that and make it not as harsh. But really, in reality, when we call it as it is, then we're able to deal with it, I think.
Agree.
I think sometimes I look back in my own life dealing with stuff, and sometimes I don't call things as it is, and as a result of it, I don't hit into the wave because I'm lightening it. I don't want to make it but I like that. I think it's important, if we want to deal with our emotions in a healthy way, we have to confront them with an honest look and call it as it is.
So I just don't know when you start doing it completely. And I've kind of, that's where the next step of this whole thing I think comes, is you don't need to worry about it as much. You naturally, as a human, your strengths and your weaknesses. Some people's strengths at the age of 15, for some reason, they just seem oddly put together. I met a couple of young people coaching football where I'm like, man, that kid is not at all a 15-year-old disaster or a 16-year-old disaster, you know? For some reason, they just seem like a little more squared away. I've literally watched kids just get wrecked. Horrible situation, everything wrong against them, completely stacked. Walk off the field, and I'm like, hey, man, like, you good? Because I'm feeling it a little bit, but I'm maintaining a high professional standard. Yeah. And just looks at me and like, no, you know, sometimes, coach, that's the way it is. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was that cool when I was 16. Like just some people. So strengths and weaknesses. Yep. You know, I get a lot of individuals who show up, or they want to train, they want to do something crazy, they want to address something, and they're brilliant. You know, they're gifted in some way, shape, or form. And I don't hold it against them anymore. I don't know when that came. It's not like a competition. It's Carl Jung said that when you meet a person of just extreme oddity, you know, left, right, crazy, instead of putting some crazy amount or some value associated to it, appreciate the anomaly that they are. So instead of taking a situation that maybe seemed like it's just a loaded gun on you, sometimes the situation is just what it is. But like you and I, that does not sit at all.
No.
At all.
No.
So I'm trying to figure out, that's the point I'm at, is when I come into a conflict or a situation that's difficult, I'm so used to hammering that wave.
Yep.
I hammer that thing, I control it, I work through it, I get it. Whether that costs me sleep, physical incapacitation, anything. My diet, I don't know, any pain.
Yeah.
But a while ago, my mom got sick, real sick, okay? And my family just fell apart around it. My parents are separated, my mom remarried, and the dude just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a call from my estranged sister, and she's like bawling, I can't do this, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, what's going on? My mom's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. We've been that for a few years. She's on my sister's couch, vegetable, nothing. Just nothing, no response. My sister can't handle it. She's not one who ever really steered into the storm. It was always everybody else's fault. So I was the older brother, she was the younger sister, and naturally it fell apart like that. She had a hard time with it. So regardless of our relationship, I show up, pick up my mom, physically pick her up, chuck her in my vehicle, take her to her house, Brittany and I deal with it. And I let that storm roll around with inconsistency, the inability to step through it, because it was my mom. I had a hard time dealing with that one. I was 27. And it's a disaster. Like, it is an immense amount of pressure to be a primary healthcare director for a sick woman, go through that whole thing as a son. And I compare myself right away. Well, there's got to be people who have dealt with this harder, and there's tons of information. Another beauty thing about the internet.
Yeah, you can find that aspect and avenues to see where else you can look.
So I find out what I need to do, kind of how it goes. I'm falling apart at the seams here. I'm trying to work.
Yeah.
My wife and I were just started dating at that time. She's just angeling this out. She's changing my mom, like saint here. So it kind of gets wrapped up. I get her kind of sorted out with some level of care. Family's picking and choosing and criticizing, and I'm having a heck of a time. I can't sleep. I'm getting a little traumatized, to be honest with you. Some real anxiety. Didn't know what anxiety really was. So about 3 months later, things are kind of sorted out. My mom just ends up in the emergency room over and over. And her dude's calling. He's back. Hey, it might not be the best time to come. Your mom's in critical care or whatever. So it's Christmas now. We're supposed to visit, and it's like the 4th critical care call. And that just destroys you, right? Of
course it would. Absolutely, yeah.
So we get there, walk into the room. We'd ordered blood work before. I was kind of getting on the up and up. I did my case study of Parkinson's and what should be treatment purpose and what shouldn't. And walk in. My mom's like, for the second time I've heard her do this, just let me die, Chris. I want to die. Just kill me. Looking at this dude across the room, useless, nothing's going on. So I'm not mad at him. No. I'm disappointed. It was the first time I thought I'd be mad.
That's an interesting difference.
It was weird. Yeah. Because usually, right?
Yeah. We want to react to it. We want to deal with the situation.
It's a threat.
Yeah.
Get rid of that threat. Eliminate that. Yeah. But that's the black and the white. One from coming from our world, but it's easier to deal with things with anger. So
because it seems to get results.
It does get results.
And often that's the catch-22, because it does get results, but it often leaves things at a more damaged state than they were before.
Yeah, you'll scorch earth a little bit.
Yeah, you hurt a lot of people, damage a lot of people, because sometimes I think we feel trapped. There's no other way to deal with it.
Well, it's not my fault. I can be angry. Well, it's not my fault you put me in this place. I'm going to let you know the kind of pain. And then all of a sudden you realize that you're lashed.
And it's easy to justify that.
Absolutely.
And then you can build a case and you feel good about it afterward. I thought,
driving home in your vehicle, just justifying it to yourself the whole time.
Yep.
So calm it down a little bit. Square it away this time. Pull the doctor to the side. What's going on? Well, we're mixing these 2 medications. I don't know where she's getting this from. Find out that my sister and this guy have been feeding mom the naturopath medication, combining it with her mainstream medication. It's creating this slump. So I just turn it into a positive all of a sudden. Not intentionally. There's not a saint move here. It was like, I am also paying the price for this. Yeah. So I just level the field. Enough. Tell my mom to stop talking. Enough. We've had enough of this. You guys are all weak. This is brutal. What do you guys want? What's your end game? So, no, this is what we're doing. It's not a DNR anymore. We're going to work through this. So start hitting it up, clarifying each step. No more offside medications, no marijuana, no nothing. We're done. Mainstream medication. We have to help the healthcare system create a baseline for you so we can make proper adjustments. Otherwise, you're just up and down. So we just do it up, enough, clean it up. And I never felt better for probably about, on my end, probably about 6 or 7 months of like brutal sledging, driving home, and I just completely alleviated all the pressure. And it realized that not everybody's tooled and equipped to deal with these circumstances. What if it was Brittany that had Parkinson's?
All of a sudden, the whole game changes again.
Because everyone blamed my mom's husband. It was his fault that my mom was in the condition. It was his fault that she wasn't taken care of. And I found out that this dude was so ill-equipped. And there is a point where you choose to be ignorant. Right? And it was there. Find out from the social care that they've had a case on my mom for like almost 2 years. They've offered home care, assessments. They just let it go. These people did. Now, is that out of ignorance, neglect, naiveness, or was it that they're scared and in denial? It's irrelevant now, but when I got to that point, I now have to deal with resentment.
What do you think? What do you think got you to that point where you started looking at things from a different angle? Because I think a lot of times we get stuck.
We do get stuck.
We get stuck, and we get stuck, and we go around that hill over and over again, dealing with the same thing. What do you think? What do you think happened?
Well,
that all of a sudden you made a switch and said, I'm going to start looking at it from another angle. And let's get back to that resentment thing too, because it's important to work through that. But how did you get to that point? Is it because you've seen nothing else is working, or
no,
what was it that got you to that point? Because I think many people here can relate to being stuck. They don't want to be stuck.
Well, what I think happens to people is, so it was two perspectives essentially. It was my perspective towards my mom, and it was her husband's perspective. So I could actively say, I can say now almost for certain, that there was a time where I was like, this is not my responsibility. I should have nothing to do with this. And I was right. I was well within my right to say that, But I believe this really hard saying. There's two types of people in this world. There's the ones who learn from the mistakes of others, the wise, and there's ones who need to learn from their own mistakes, the ignorant.
Can you have to say that again, because that's a pinnacle point.
The wise learn from the mistakes of others.
The wise learn from the mistakes of others.
Whereas the ignorant need to learn
from their own mistakes.
So when you go through this conversation, actually it's a really great tool as a strength coach, which is like, my other thing. And
that's right. Yeah.
Dude, I'm sharing this information with you because I myself have not only paid the price, but I've also had some excellent coaches who've also paid the price. So my coaching or my teaching, anything like that, is in theory, you should be better than me in 3 to 5 years. If you stuck with me for a year, you should take the majority of my knowledge.
That's the heart of a true leader.
Right.
He wants his students to excel past what he's himself achieved.
I had a good
the one that's threatened by it will make sure
all of the
and keep everything down here. And that's powerful, because when we want to see others excel farther and higher than us, that's a make of a powerful, influential leader.
So what I would like to do from there is I would like to create a community of individuals who are willing to share and work off of each other, because if you're not always going to be the biggest fish in the pond.
No.
So
and why is it hard to recognize that? I think sometimes we think we're the real, we are the deal.
We have to protect ourselves. I mean, naturally you do, and I think, like, that's coming back to my social contract point. I think there's a fear in there. There's a genuine fear, genuine insecurity. Because even with some of my closest friends, and my friend circle is, it's growing. It grows more and more still. When I come back, I become more open. But like, my oldest friend is my best friend since I was 5 years old. 30 years. You met him. He was my best man.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
And even when I address stuff with him, he genuinely has a fear of addressing his own insecurities. But my job isn't to remind him of those insecurities. Is to create almost.
Sometimes we think it is.
Yeah, well,
sometimes we think it is.
He's basically my brother. So it's to create a safe enough space.
I like that.
And I know that the word got a real bad taste in people's mouths a while ago, but I have a really close, passionate friend. Very compassionate. Oh my God. The level of compassion this woman shares. And she is the exact opposite approach to me, but the exact same result at the end of the day. And we work off of each other all the time. And we debate openly in a non-offensive, and even if it is an offensive fashion, it's under the understanding that we're having an open discussion.
Yeah.
So I think platforms like this,
yes,
long-form discussion, I think it's an unfortunate necessity for individuals to come and watch people critically discuss and manage stuff that they've been through, and only to have them relate. But I'm not going to lie to you. You can literally ask your next door neighbor if they've struggled, suffered, or had to deal with something, and you will find an entire world, an entire chapter of people who are also just as equipped. I have found that people are so scared to just engage or share. As a veteran, right? I find that our individuals, our people, have a really hard time sharing some of their time. And I'm really curious as to why that is. It's not because the stuff that we've done is necessarily unheard of. I think it's sometimes because we're insecure of the judgment, or whether or not we're proud of our situation. And so
insecurity is a big one. It really is a big one. It's a real obstacle to have to push through. I know when I started to deal with some of emotional damage and emotional hurt and stuff that I just had to go through, confronting those things were never easy. One, I'm afraid what people think. Second, I'm unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar territory, so I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know where my emotions are going to go. So then I'll keep everything in so that I can control stuff. And by doing that, we rob ourselves of freedom. We rob ourselves of really healing some of those damaged areas. And I think by hiding against insecurities, by hiding against fears, by hiding against those things, we just prolong the damage further and further. And part of these discussions, and that's when I think I've really valued some of our discussions that we've had, because those masks come off. And when you share from an honest perspective of some of the stuff that you've had to push through, that doesn't make me want to hide. That makes me want to go, well, if you can go through it, well, then I can go through it too. If you can confront those giants, then I can confront those giants too. And sometimes those giants aren't necessarily big, but they're big here. Because they're unknown. And I know some of the conversations we've had as a result, even on our porch or in our deck, the four of us, walking away feeling that I'm okay with some things exposed, because that's how I will navigate and learn from those things. And I think if people get the chance, and you used the word safe, I think that's important, because if we're not safe, we're not going to say nothing.
That's right.
And people need to realize that safe is birthed out of relationship, vulnerability from other people, because I don't like spending time with people that are closed books. They seem to have the answers. They seem to, they're on top of everything, which we know is not true.
That's right.
But what opens me up is other people saying, hey, I had a mentor of mine that gone through a lot of crap in his life. And the interesting thing about it is he was open about it. I've had to navigate and work through. And as a result of that, it was like, it's almost like an invitation.
That's right.
Oh, I can be real. And if I can just jump into something for a second, because oftentimes I think when we bring spirituality to things, there's a perception, there's an understanding where we have to have things together. And I think the danger of that is oftentimes that leaves a wrong picture.
I think so.
Of what that is. And what that picture creates sometimes is people to stay away from heading into that direction, because that's part of healing.
That's right.
And so when you've been taught, or an assumption that everything has to be so, that was a wall for me. I can't be like that. I can't fit into that mold.
You can't afford to be like that.
No.
You can't be perceived as being
No.
flawed or weak or
Absolutely
deranged.
not. Absolutely
I know.
not. And if you don't have this in place or that, and it's helped me, discussions like this, talks like this with other people that are open and honest about their own emotions and dealing with their own insecurities and fear and whatever else to navigate through those situations. And again, I love to go back to that point where it's pointing the boat into the wave.
I
love that because again, so much of our life has been told to avoid those areas in a natural sense.
That's right.
Of course, when in the military context, we taught to think, go after it. That we're not afraid, we're not backing down, and yet there's areas that we don't go after like that.
That's right.
And so it's like, but to be able to talk that through and navigate that through, I always use the word navigate. Probably people think, goodness sake, you use that word navigate. But that's what it is.
I don't know other ways.
Navigating is a good word because it catches you in the process. And no matter what we're struggling with, no matter what we're facing, no matter what demon is in front of us staring us down, we've got to face it. Part of healing our lives emotionally, spiritually, mentally, is we can't avoid those. And I think so much, and this is something that's helped me because so much of my life I've been able to avoid. But only to have it stare at you in another because it doesn't go away.
Yeah, and so when we first started that conversation, how I pictured that was 10 years at a time, by the way.
10 years at a time.
10 years at a time. That's not true. I don't have a number to that yet. I haven't pitched that to play that out with a couple, in a good social setting.
Yeah.
I'll play with a few of that through basic psychology through some friends. So the deal is, you felt your strongest when you had completed blank.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever that is, from people, high school to university to career goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes family goals, So for us, it's, man, I completed this big chunk or whatever. Yeah, I'm a god.
That's my check.
Look how powerful I am, right? So I think that this has a little bit of a role to play too with careers in the last while. How nobody has just one 25-year career anymore.
Right, yeah.
And I've been playing with that a little bit because I've had a few now. I'm in my third career out of the military. I've only been out of the military for 8 years. Yeah. That's long enough.
I've been out, I think, 11.
And I've had a few now. And my employers will ask, especially if I have an interview or something, or other people ask, whatever I'm doing, man, you are not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be in, the Estevan area or something. What are you doing, Been in a couple of movies. And I'm I don't know, man. I have this saying that I have it up in my garage. What man is a man who does not make his world a better place? And I don't mean men exclusively, just what human can really call themselves a human if you cannot at least attempt to make the world, or even if it's just your world, a better place. So every time I move into a different career or a different setting, I find myself moving in a lateral movement. It's never up the line. It's so easy for me to fall back into military setting. Mm-hmm. And I did that when I got scared for a while, bad relationship, breakup, sickness, death. And I'm man, I'm just going to go back to doing what I do really well. Mm-hmm. And in my gut, the reason I retired was because I felt that the direction at the time the military was moving wasn't a healthy direction for me. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that I was willing to pull the pin. Yeah. And I pulled it, no question. I just, boop, out. And I know the police really well here, and I got pulled in probably when I got back about 2 years later. So I was around Vancouver and Edmonton and such for a while, and a police that brought me up, and they'd asked, they're on their way to retirement. And they asked me, how did you do it, man? Once they bared a little bit of feelings. Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? I looked up to these guys too, mm-hmm. growing up. How did you quit? I'm how did I retire? And they're yeah. They're this is all I know. And I'm see, that's weird. For me, that fear, that insecurity inspires me. I like that fire. I want to go because I want to challenge that next section of it. So maybe it's positive. But it doesn't mean I haven't seen a ridiculous low. You know, I've seen my own versions of darkness, and the longer I fought it and the longer I denied it, the worse it eventually caught me. So when I started to navigate
Yeah.
how that went, the beauty of navigating it when it came to that level of darkness or that place was learning that it wasn't necessarily something to navigate, but it was something to respect, understand, possibly comprehend. Because something like anxiety and depression wasn't about defeating it or overcoming it. It was about understanding that it was just one of the several emotions that you don't really want to pay attention to. Shame,
Which we need to pay attention
and
to.
it is.
Yeah.
I felt that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and I waited, and it was a hard struggle. But mine was minor compared to some people. I think I did a total of 4 months in like the deep, dark anxiety pit. But it all came crashing down. You're talking 15 years of high performance anxiety, and then just
Boom.
and it hit me like a brick. I was at a really ridiculous job where usually I would tell somebody to kick dirt in a heartbeat, and I started letting it go. I started letting people roll on me, bad bosses, poor leaders, people that were influencing my workspace, bad atmosphere, and I started to let the world change me instead of me start changing the world again. But I let it in.
That's interesting terminology. I like that.
I let it in, and I thought, you know what it was. There was people around me who are struggling themselves, and instead of me expecting the social contract of them helping support me, not necessarily friends, but just maybe the odd work, person you work with, somebody you're around. And just a little bit of a pull down. And it pulled every other day, pull down. Bad boss, bad leader, pull down. And you starting to destabilize your foundations, the things that really you believed in. So all of a sudden anxiety came crashing in. I'm fetal position in a couch. I can't eat. I'm vomiting in the morning. Wife will come home, thank God. Just her touch, her voice, just calm me. Thank God I had that. And what I had to do, which is my favorite and the thing I appreciate the most about the emotional struggle, is what I use, and I found out I've been using this since I was a boy. I didn't come up with necessarily the greatest upbringing. It was rough. I have this visualization. You're buried alive. That's anxiety.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
And what you have to do to get out of it is you have to scratch your fingernail 1 inch at a time and create one step until you create the next step. And that's how I visualize getting out of the pit until you scoop until it's a step, until you're scooping until it's a step, until you're stepping out, until eventually you step onto the surface again. So I thought once I overcame and understood that version of anxiety that it was all over. I thought it was gone. No, it's just another 10 years or another time period.
Yeah, another time period.
So maybe it'll be children. Maybe it'll be a couple of children, right? Learning to tool around it, but not to try to defeat it. Steer into the storm, but know that you're still always surrounded by the ocean.
There's a word called courageous. And the word courageous, I latched onto it.
I like that word.
I latched onto it because it was part of something that I could grab onto. Because courageous understands your fear, understands the wave.
Right.
But being courageous means you understand that,
but you're willing.
But you go after it.
You're willing to step.
Oftentimes we think courage is
just I'm doing it.
Okay. Close your eyes and go. You know what I mean? It's not.
It's not.
The courageous spirit acknowledges the potential of danger, disappointment, hurt, failure, all those realities that we have locked in here. But they recognize that and they make a conscious decision. I'm still going forward.
That's right.
And that's powerful because I used to always see as courage as just blind, run, and whatever happens.
Yeah.
But courage, recognizes those things. And I think sometimes we don't want to acknowledge those things. We don't want to see those things because they're too big.
That's right.
But when you recognize those things, this is an obstacle for me. This is a scary moment for me. This is insecurity for me. When I go here, I have to confront these things. Knowing that and going after with that knowledge, that's the birth of doing this.
That's right.
And oftentimes we want, I don't know if you're like me, sometimes we just want it all to be done with just like that. Let's just get over with. But it's navigating through it.
I started to appreciate the suffrage, but I've always been a character of suffrage. I like suffrage. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is.
I'm learning to appreciate it now more than ever. Absolutely.
I think that's where my love of like fitness, strength, and conditioning side of it, I think that's where my love of that came. Like and as I'm aging too, as I'm getting older, I'm not as fast, or I'm not as quick to get on my horse sometimes, but once I'm rolling through it, it's rekindled again, the appreciation for the suffrage. And I believe out of that humans are wise or ignorant conversation, that truly people tend to be their best, show their greatest character values under suffrage.
Yes.
And so I'm a big teacher, a big student of suffrage. War is suffrage, life is suffrage. And I don't mean it to be bleak. I mean,
I know what you mean, yeah.
I think that you truly learn to appreciate it, because if you're saying you don't need to suffer and that's ridiculous and that life should be comfort, I would assume that you are probably one of the most arrogant people I've ever met. I just don't get it. I do not understand that part of it. Like, are you telling me that you strive to never find a difficult situation? You will become one of the most unreliable individuals. And I'm not asking for perfection.
It's like going to a mechanic that all he has is book knowledge and doesn't understand how things work necessarily. And what do we want? We want people that know.
That's
that
right.
Gone through. I've never gone into an airplane and flown somewhere where I've heard the captain say, you know what, this is my first flight, and you know what, and we're going to do this together, and I've taken all the courses. How many people be nervous in the plane?
Absolutely.
You want to know that person has gone through suffrage, had to make decisions in difficult moments, and able to navigate himself through that, so then you can relax. There was a number of years ago when we lived in Vernon, British Columbia, we had some missionaries that worked in Haiti. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And so we spent 2 weeks with them. Haiti? What's that?
When they did Haiti when it was hit?
No.
Like a long time ago?
It was in 2000. 2000.
Oh, okay.
In 2000.
Because I did Haiti was a DART team, disaster and relief team.
Yes,
in like 2008. So I'm like,
it would have been before that. It would have been before that.
All right, carry on.
They mentioned when the DART team came, because he wrote letters and says, "Oh, my son got a ride in the lab, and all that." Really? Blah. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, we went through a storm, and actually a storm was coming, and we had to anchor point the boat in 3 points.
Oh yeah.
And he said, "You got nothing to worry about. I've gone through this before. We're going to keep an eye on how things are. I've navigated through before." And all he did was calm us all down.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because he's been through worse.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the head knowledge. He has the experience. He's had to work through. And I think that brings credibility for sure.
I really look for individuals, like a lot of people I'm around are young right now, and like my wife, her brother, and their people, they're young, and just working with those guys or just talking with them, and that's all I want out of it. Some people, I find it's a strange conversation. It's either a threat or it's about competition or ego.
Why is it that we're threatened? Why is it that we're
I think it's because,
why is that?
I think it's because we're challenging the ignorance out of ourselves. Again, I don't know why it just circles back to it. I'm not stating like at any point that I am perfect or I know something. No. I'm just willing to acknowledge the fact that I am flawed.
Yes.
And I enjoy and start to appreciate the fact that I am
there's
flawed.
A freedom that comes to that, because if you don't feel that you can confront that or deal with that, then you hide behind it.
You just restrict yourself.
And this is what happened to me. So I would never go after that. So everything I did was skin deep, because I didn't want anyone to go deeper. They're going to find out that I have some issues. Mm-hmm. And so I learned to navigate the conversations. I learned how far I would go into conversations.
Where you could take it and
yes.
pull back out of it.
Yes.
So it wasn't exposed.
But what happened was...
that is deep, though.
What happened was, though, Because sometimes we can't always protect ourselves. And so we've learned to navigate and learn to protect ourselves, keep ourselves so the real us doesn't come out and this garbage doesn't come out, all this other stuff. Yeah. But all of a sudden there's occasions where I remember I was sitting down and talking with some people, and I'd been out of the military already and not learning how to navigate some of the stuff that I went through or whatever, right? Yeah. And so, but careful. I have an image to be up. I need to make sure everything's okay. I've got it together. I've got all these things. And in a regular conversation, this was just sitting at the living room table, just talking. All of a sudden, he triggered something. And not purposely. It was just in the conversation. And all of a sudden, I reacted. Yeah. And he noticed I reacted and said, are you okay? I said, yeah. So he said, well, man alive, you got some issues to deal with. And that was a threat to me.
Did you react? Yeah, I was like, did you react
threat
again?
That's none of your business. I said, no, I've got that taken care of. I've got that covered.
Yeah. F-bomb. I'm going to
And then he said this. And then he said this. He says, you're a very bitter man.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
And I'm like...
If I'm going to my house.
Like, I could feel the temperature rising because all of a sudden he was seeing something that's locked up in there that I kept locked up. Mm-hmm. And he was innocently. He wasn't purpose. He's not trying to agitate me.
The bitter conversation's a bit of the secondary.
Yes, and so it came out, and all of a sudden I said, I have every right to be bitter. And all of a sudden,
nice.
I let it out, and I said, this is why I got this, and I started listing the reasons, everybody else's fault for why I was in the situation I was in. Okay. And he was kind enough or sly enough. I don't know if it was kind or sly.
Appreciate the anomaly. That
yes, there you go.
All right. Don't associate emotion necessarily.
And so he sat there, and it was like a barrel that opened up, and I just kept going and going and going. And I thought, well, we're here. And I didn't realize that I was unloading all these emotions, all these hidden damages and experiences and whatever else. And I unloaded. And he just sat there and just listened. And then I think I exhausted myself. I think maybe I realized, okay, I'm exhausted. And he said, man, he said two things. If you're not willing to deal with those emotions, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to go down a slippery slope of your life. And second, you're going to destroy the people that are in front of you. And I'm like, in my mind, who in the heck do you think you are?
It's a very blunt way to approach it.
Absolutely.
So I question parts of that, like that's an escalation.
Yeah.
It's a blatant escalation, like if you're you're not, this guy is not perfect, you're not a psychologist, maybe he's threatened himself, you don't really know. So what we do is we don't know that variable.
Yeah.
Chuck that to the side altogether. This guy has hit some shit.
Yeah,
He's opened up a can.
Yeah, he has.
Right?
Did he ever?
Forwarding a little bit is questionable character. Maybe that's his version of defending himself. You're an imposing guy.
Yeah.
Right? Some people themselves right away. Sometimes it's about taking down the king.
Yeah.
People want to come at you. They want to say some stuff to poke at you a little bit, right?
Could be.
The consequence to that behavior is at that point, that's
a mess.
But I don't really blame you. If you would have hammered this individual, physically, I've been like, guy brought some stuff, paid some price for it.
But what it did for me, though, this was the amazing thing is, it was almost like I seen myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was watching not that I was, but it felt like all of a sudden, all this crap was coming out, and all this stored up emotions and anger and all that kind of stuff. But the sad reality is all it did was make me more careful the next time.
Oh, that is too bad.
I did not want to go.
Yeah, that is too bad. It's bad because what's cool was that opportunity was a perspective opportunity.
Yes.
You seen
I did.
What this could or could not be.
And instead of me turning into the wave, I did just like this.
It's hard, man. It's no one when I
did come to the place where I started dealing with that stuff. Absolutely, not good. Then, because what I think it did is it exposed something. One, that I was vulnerable. Yep. That I couldn't keep all my doors locked. And I think a lot of times people are feeling that way. This is what happened to me. It was so much work keeping the doors closed.
Yes.
It was so stressful.
Bound and
Always guarding the conversations.
Yes.
And always being careful that triggers weren't being triggered. That I didn't want to be around people because I didn't know if that would happen again.
Right.
And it got exhausting to the point where I can't do this anymore. Like, and even growing up in a church culture,
it can be.
It was that way too.
Oh yeah, no,
it was like slam the doors, careful, because people are gonna see and they're gonna reject.
Yeah,
and I didn't like rejection.
Yeah, well,
and
none
so
of us do, I don't think.
Door closed, and so, but I did come to a place too where I had to that I can't do this anymore, and for me, everything came on the table.
Oh yeah,
everything. This was on the table. That was on the table. Everything. If we're gonna deal, let's deal with it all.
How old were you?
I don't know. I was probably about. I was married already, and it was really hard for my wife to watch that go through.
This when kind of what we talked about.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a tough. Brittany didn't know how to deal when I was anxiety ridden,
and she didn't either because I came to the point where I had exhausted everything. I couldn't do it anymore.
And it's so hard. Like, I don't know.
To see me crushed, to see me emotionally unstable, unstable maybe is the word, because I didn't know what to do. And I used to be afraid of those words. I'm not afraid of those words anymore. To the point where I even seen someone to say, am I wrecked?
Oh yeah.
Am I wrecked? Like, am I done? And I had to come to grips with all those things, and all on the table. And people watched this, and it was like, "Where is this going to land? Don't know where it's going to land. I have no idea. I've never been here before." But I wanted to deal with those things, and that was huge.
That's a great thing for one.
Huge.
It's so hard. I knowing some individuals who have basically suffered a lifetime of it. Can you imagine? Diagnosed or even stigmatized, you're anxiety ridden.
Yeah.
So you're insecure, kind of comes and goes with depression at the age of 13.
Because I battled with depression all my life.
Imagine just running that, and that is the norm. So are you going to fix that? No. It's the first rule of anxiety. You don't fix it. Right? You learn to appreciate it. I had a young lady actually say to me the other day, who I know really well, really close, and we were all joking and everyone's emoting. So there's lots of tears. I'm not crying at this point because I'm all in like good neutral headspace. I'm probably the one who brought on the tears through some challenging conversation. And they're emoting, and I'm like, "Are you good?" And I'm like, "You just emoting?" Kind of joking. We're very close, and she kind of laughed, and she's like, "No." She's like, "It's just anxiety." I'm like, "Oh," but for her, it's real, like the anxiety we're talking about. She's just like, "No, it's just anxiety," and that was such a step above the behavior she had 3-5 years ago. She understood it. She's grasping with it. And I still get anxious. I still have insecurities, obviously. But when for sure. When I sense it, right? Like I'll wake up some mornings and I'll be like, ooh, I'm anxious today. A little anxious. And that grip alone, just, it might be a little bit of an anxious day, or it might be an anxious day. Yeah. I don't feel real hungry, right? Well, just make sure you get some food in you, right? And I'm not asking for perfection. I'm not saying stick to your diet, if you're keto or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you're human today. Yeah. Quit holding yourself to a standard of perfectionism.
We had this conversation on our deck, or no. Okay. Might have been, and you nailed it in the head, because we're wired to be the absolute best, and so then we need to equip ourselves that way. We need to guide ourselves that way. Everything has to be with that A. Mm-hmm. We don't accept the B.
That's right.
And I recognize that.
Yeah, it was our A and B because
I recognized that because it was like, this is what I thought in my head. If you're okay with a B, why can't I be?
That's right.
Why am I robbing myself of always having to reach this when maybe this is it for now? Mm-hmm. I couldn't wrap my head around that, and I worked through that a while. I thought, and yet it was freeing.
Oh, it's liberating.
Because the standard of everything had to be here. And the thing is with that mindset is we expect everybody else to be there too, or it's not good enough.
That's right. So what you do is you take your value system.
Yes, you do.
And you put it on other people.
Yep.
Why don't you work out like I do? Why don't you have the same work ethic?
Yep.
And coming from like our world, where you have fathers who you could just have a grade 12, you could have a grade 10, make 6 figures a year.
Yep.
Right? I thought that you could grow up being a baker and you could have a house and a family and a vehicle. And now it's like you need 2 incomes. So there's this increasing level of perfectionism. You need to do better. You need to be better. You need to have more income. So I'm a bit of a threat when it comes to my employers, where I'm like, no, I don't need, like, I'm good. I'm good there. I'm going to work for you.
Yeah.
I believe in an honest interaction.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm here to do a job. If you want me to do more, there should be compensation, vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? So if they're willing to take, they better be willing to give. And so I started to just neutralize that a little more B- activity, not so much A+. No, I'm good. I'm here to work. I'm going to do the job. That's why you paid me to do the job. It's okay that you're not necessarily going to execute an A+ today. And that's a really hard thing to do.
That's a freeing thing, though, when you can come to that, because that's often with our anxiety.
That's right.
It's like, well, if I'm not going to win at it, then I'm not going to try.
So we have a saying sometimes where it's like, I don't want perfection, I want progression. But when it comes to emotions, I don't necessarily even want progression. I want acknowledgement, and I want you to sit on that a little bit. You asked me before how I figured out how to come to terms with it, where I took perspective. Yep. And I have this big thing about self-care. So whether it's, and I don't know.
I'm now more ever. I'm a firm believer in that self-care.
So mine came from martial arts as a youth. And I grew up in a hard, Catholic household. My grandma was a huge influence on me. Hard Roman Catholic. Big push on it. But I started meditating young.
Yep.
And I didn't know that I was anxiety-ridden. And then all of a sudden it all comes to terms 30 years later. And you're like, oh yeah, that's why you were vomiting before your math test. You didn't know why. Because I was never that strong at it.
These are all regular emotions.
That's right. So,
and
eventually...
learning to deal with them is so powerful.
Oh, and so instead of being perfect at them or even progressing on them, sometimes it was just about sitting on something. So my buddy asked a while ago, where are you? How do you kind of manage that so well? Or what are you doing with that?
Yeah. And
I'm like, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get super aggressive. Man, I used to scream, fight, and I would work out 3 times a day. I'm talking crazy stuff. People loved for it. They loved to follow it, not knowing that sometimes that behavior isn't necessarily healthy.
Right.
So what I started doing was I intentionally put myself in the space that you don't want to put yourself in. The crappy interaction you had today with a customer, a family member, somebody via text, somebody on Facebook. Yeah. So I started to not ignore it. I didn't have Facebook necessarily at the time. It was other stuff. The kids at school on the playground. So I stopped on it and I sat on it. Whether it was in the corner, whether it was before I went to bed, because we all know when the light goes off, and you're staring and it's just you at the end of the day, that's the one you answer to. Yep. That's the big one, right? Because I'm not talking at the end of life here. I'm talking every day.
That's right.
When you can't go to sleep and you're thinking of that stupid thing that happened. So instead of shying from that or justifying it in some way, don't. Acknowledge it. Appreciate it, or whatever it is for that moment, and just sit on that and just breathe your way through it. And you'll find yourself disseminating it and eventually just evaporating that through whatever emotional body that is, your mind, your heart, your soul. I don't know what it is for sure, man.
Kerwin Ray says something along that line about it takes about 6 seconds of deep breath in and out for you to kind of, so you don't react.
That's right.
You just, okay, I gotta breathe. Why is it?
I think we're animal.
Gotta go after it. It's just, it's like we can't. It's almost like we have to have this discussion now. We got to deal with it, and we got to follow through now. And I think one of the things that I learned in my life, and my staff would testify to it at times too when I work with people, is I used to bring such pressure to the table.
Yeah.
Because I would show up and the tension would go up. Because I had an expectation. I expected certain things. I wanted certain things done. I didn't accept a B. I only accepted an A. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, we had a funny thing happen. Technology is big to me. It's not big that I know it, but I want it to work.
Okay.
And when it doesn't work, I get agitated. It's frustrating. And one time we had everything set up, ready to go, and all of a sudden, one of our main computers failed.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the projection. That was everything else. And I remember pacing then.
Bulk smash.
I've got to fix it. There's got to be. And all of a sudden, I realized I'm damaging my own health.
Oh, yeah.
I'm damaging myself because I wouldn't let it breeze over.
That's right.
And so I had a conversation with myself. I'm careful where I do it because if people think I'm, but I had a conversation with myself. Why is that my immediate reaction? At the end of the day, does it matter? At the end of the day, no, it doesn't matter. It matters to me. But does it really matter?
That's right.
Can I accept when it fails? Can I still go on with peace, with calmness, with my wits about me when it's not? So I had to wrestle within myself to say, okay, it's not going to be here. It's going to be here. I'm okay with that.
Ooh, nice. That's a good one. Hey?
And when I was okay with it, it was like, oh, yeah, I don't know why I have to lose myself over something like that.
That's right.
And so the test came. Something else happened. And I could see people, I don't know exactly what it was, but I could see people's temperatures escalate because they're going to, how is he going to handle it?
Right.
And all of a sudden I said, it's no big deal. Don't even worry about it. We'll carry on. It's not a problem. Don't even worry about it. I don't want you sweating. I don't want you pacing. Don't worry about it. And all of a sudden, I brought calm to what normally would have been, I brought calm.
That's good.
And I watched that happen.
That's awesome.
And so those are momentous things that stick in my mind that when I feel anxiety coming, where all of a sudden it's like, no. I remember another time there was something happen, and normally I want a decision right away.
Right.
And so there was something happening at work that needed a decision. It was like, it felt like it was life and death. And all of a sudden I stopped myself, and this is important to recognize those things when they start coming. I stopped myself and said, you know what? I don't need to make a decision right now.
Ooh.
You don't? I said no, because what happens is I make an irrational decision, and that often causes more damage than what's intended. So I'm not making a decision. I'm going to ride it out, and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that.
It almost gave people permission to process.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
And it gave myself permission, and I watched it. It's like
awesome. Good feeling too, though.
Absolutely,
Great
because
feeling.
You know what? I hit the wave dead on.
A few years ago, actually a long time ago, in the military primarily, I wasn't really sure like what I was. So I have an expectation, I have a perspective of myself, and I don't know what I'm supposed to be. So I'm fighting through the usual struggles of a young person or whatever. And
Identity.
And I'm
don't know our identity.
And I'm in this organization where you're all big shooters, right? Like you've met our group. Mm-hmm. They are not necessarily kind people. It is cutthroat and it is gang related. So you're struggling through that anyways. But what I started to do after I started to get a sense of what I wanted to do or how I wanted to do it was I ran on performance anxiety for, I have no idea when. But I've always appreciated and I always wanted to be the patient guy because I was never really patient as a youth. And not as a youth, but as like a 25-year-old. I always wanted to be a little more patient. So I started holding myself to that standard about 27, 26. And 10 years later, I started to really show like levels of patience and levels of wisdom that I didn't hold. And I was like, man, I'm going to start. I said that. I remember saying when I was 20, I was dating a girl who was like 6 years older than me, and she's like, I just don't get you. You're not like a 19-year-old. You're not a 20-year-old. And I'm like, you know what I did, to be truthful, is I sat in a corner, sat in my room. Before I went to bed, I didn't run away from my feelings, and I just sat on something. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm not making the best decisions right now. So this month or this week, I'm going to create a habit. I didn't say a habit, but I built one, where I'm just going to not do this kind of stupid thing a little bit less. Not perfection, just progression. So I'd already acknowledged it. So I just started to progress a little bit at a time, because I knew that this wasn't going to be a sprint. I just wanted it to be a marathon. And I told her boldly that whoever I'm around and where I'm at the age of 25, I will be impacting whatever I'm touching drastically. And that was my last-ish year of, I did 10 months in Afghanistan at that time, and I was rocking and rolling hard. I still had lessons to learn, but I'd set that time frame out, and I wanted to hold myself to a bit of a standard, because I knew that there was just a lot of complacency where I was. And I just knew that I needed to try it. For me, it was my call to adventure. I needed that push. Not everybody needs to go through extreme circumstances to be a hero or to be an amazing person. Sometimes you can just do that every day. Because people believe, big people, the big scary stuff in the world, people believe that it's great acts of bravery and courage that hold back the evil, the bad feelings. And it's not. No. It's the everyday little good.
And I don't think people pay attention to that. We want this big thing. We want this glamorous stuff when it's every day. It's how I treat my wife. It's how I communicate to my kids. It's how, when I'm in a lineup at Walmart to pay for something and someone in front of me wants to talk about everything other than paying for their stuff, it's how I deal with that situation.
Just a little bit.
It's always, we want the big, but it's the little moments that make the big moments.
Which is why I like Suffrage so much. It brings people all down, which is why you find brotherhood in places like police departments, fire departments, military, EMT, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The more humans tend to suffer together, the more they grow and understand and learn to appreciate it. They learn to appreciate each other for what it is, right?
I never thought I could ever say that I appreciate process.
Oh, my God.
I've said this, and it's synonymous to, I think one of my sayings is, the process is just as important as the end result.
I never got that part of it, because that never clicked for me. It never hit home. The navigation is what I think of. I was a big navigation guy in the military. And I got a lot of lessons there. I was lucky. I had good people around me, good men, a few women, who really, they helped set a standard, and they were not dicks. They weren't necessarily horrible people. I got stuck in a place for a little bit, and I was waiting to transition my career. And I show up, and the staff that are in charge of us, they're like, this guy, and his buddies are pretty turned on. They're sharpshooters. These guys need to go do something. We can't just let them waste away. So they send me to this op force, training platoon kind of thing. And so I get there, and it's like some retiree guys and some reservists, and we're like, oh my God,
what's going on?
Well, no, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And I get there, and there's Warrant who's there. Awesome dude. Okay, big shout out to Warrant Dunn.
I have a few in my career too that I would.
He pulls me in, and he's like, so you're the leader of these blank beep beep? And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, I guess so, Warrant. And he's like, Kate. He's like, and you're the guy who's representing them? And I'm like, yes, Warren. I have no idea. But apparently this guy's good to go. And he comes from a combat unit, so, hats off, right? Pulls me over. He's like, this is your job. He's like, you're a smart kid. And I'm like, I'm a hot shit. So I'm like, Warren. And he's like, this is what I want you to do every day you come here. Pulls me over to the coffee machine. You know how to make coffee? That was my job every day for the entire time I spent with him. My first job. Only then to be eventually advanced promoted inside of it, running a counter operations force. I basically ran a Taliban unit for a training team, making pipe bombs, blowing guys up, going through the whole deal, run through a kill house, all SWAT tactics, right? All of our kill house stuff, right?
Yeah,
you would have done a bunch of that.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And then to meet General Bashir, as I'm training with and training a team of guys to demo General Bashir, who runs the Afghan National Army, who then I end up training his close protection unit in Afghanistan.
That's incredible, yeah.
3 years later. And some of these guys would present stuff. Listen, Chris, Bayerle. Like, I know you're coming in here with your issue, but instead of giving me the problem and expecting me to solve it for you, I'm asking you to navigate a couple of solutions. Navigate a solution and present that to me. Always leading, always trying to teach a step above, giving me the freedom, right? So I think when people choose to be scared, they're not sure.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel that they want to be there a little bit. And I'm not saying not a natural reaction to be scared or ignorant or fearful or insecure. I'm saying that there's a moment, like when a ball is in the air and it stops at zero gravity, and you have a choice at this point, right? Are you going to disseminate this information? Are you going to take that breath? Are you going to just lean a direction, right? Because the ball's not going to just go right.
No.
It's going to slowly fall right. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Left or right. Don't leave it up to chance necessarily. Well, I'm not asking for perfection either.
Yeah.
I'm not saying make this choice, it's going to be perfect every time.
Yeah.
Just maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next time. Whether that's relationship, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, job, friends. Friends and family can be some of the worst people to navigate around, and they're brutal sometimes. They want what's best for you, but they're putting their value system on you. So have the courage.
Living with other people's expectations.
Performance anxiety. You got to do better. Why aren't you like this? You know, and you have to have the courage sometimes just to face the storm.
Yes.
You know, accepting that part of it. Here comes the tidal wave. Look at it this time instead of, no, it's too scary. Because sometimes that's mom and dad. Sometimes that's a tough place where they're telling you, and you're like, hey, listen, I want to put up a rebuttal, not out of rebellion or disrespect. You know, and like my parents had to learn that lesson too with me. I came back and my dad was still trying that. He just didn't know. He didn't know how to engage with me, you know? And I'm like, no, man. Like I've done some stuff. I've been around. I'm not saying I know everything, but you're stepping with me. So I'm just saying, hey, here's your first chance. I'm accepting this weird relationship that we're in. Okay? Next week, hey, no. Or yes.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and I had to work through it. And it wasn't this cutthroat black and white, which I hate. I didn't like working in the gray. But people work in the gray. Emotions are in the gray.
Yes.
So sometimes it's just, okay, well, gotta work through this a little bit today.
Again, the word navigation, I think, is key because it's easy to work in black and white. I'm natural black and white.
Yeah,
This. It's simple. Life is simple.
You ride on anger.
But I've realized that that's not how life works.
Yeah.
And so when I allow to work within the scope of life, meaning there's decisions, there's times that I'm going to make an issue of something and I'm not going to make an issue, learning to navigate through that stuff, I think is so beneficial to not only our own health, but our own perspective and our mind and how we relate and how we deal with stuff. And so I remember someone said to me one time years ago, I said, why are you always angry? So I'm not angry. So you're always angry. You go 0 to 60 in a couple of seconds. It's like we're scared to bring something up because all of a sudden we don't know how you're going to react. And I'm not angry.
Why'd you figure if you were? Why'd you figure you were? Did you figure it out?
I figured it out because I didn't have control.
I figure it because it's the safest way we learn to deal. That's our tool.
Yeah.
And when you're in a world of constant threat assessment, the best way to eliminate a threat, aside from understanding it, is to completely eliminate it.
Yeah.
So one of the best tools to eliminate things is through anger.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a great tool for us. And places like the military and other groups, sometimes they enforce that behavior.
Yes.
So I had a friend ask me here actually just last weekend, like I've had a couple of bad run-ins with police officers, and they're kind of piggybacking on the current climate in the United States. And I was like, calm it down. And they were really open with me and they were coming at me like I was some like wise man discussing it, and I'm like, I am very much on a pro-authoritarian side. I may not show that or something, but I'm like, you should get that sense. But I'm like, go ahead, like let's discuss it. And that's what I started doing with people. I get a lot of
we're afraid. Behavior. Why are we afraid to have discussion? Discussion is healthy. I love discussion.
Yeah, you gotta have it.
I love to discuss and walk through things, even though at the end of the day we might not agree and we might not have the same opinion. But at least let's create a platform. Let's have the discussion.
Right now is a really easy time to escape consequence, humility, reaction.
Yeah.
So people can get away with a lack of consequence to their behavior, and it's a really difficult time to navigate. We're really beating up the word navigate today.
Yeah, it's a big word though.
But I like the younger girls or the younger people I'm around, like my sisters and stuff. I'm like, dude, what do you want? You want everything that's good out of this. You don't expect anything else. I'm like, you're living in the black just as much as I am. If that's the case. Oh yeah, don't worry about what happens with it. Don't worry about what you say. Don't worry about what you do. Just don't worry about it. Eventually that'll just never cause any issue. That's why I kind of push the idea of I want you to suffer. I want you to pay for this. Why would you say that? I'm like, you deserve it. Why, you don't think you deserve to pay for the action? If anything, at one point, you're going to have enough humility to appreciate that you messed up. And you're going to go, yeah, I messed up. And that is a huge time for a lot of people when they go, yeah, I messed that one up pretty good. I guess that kind of happened. Like, yeah, I got fired from my job. Well, you didn't go to work for 3 days. It's a busy time. Your boss asked you to. They even gave you a chance to.
Yeah.
They called you. They texted you. You said sure, and then you still bailed. Then you get fired and go, I hated that job. It was a crappy job anyways. I'm like, well, maybe that was the case, but you definitely deserve to get fired. Why would you say that? Well, maybe they needed to make room for somebody that wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else really needed a job. Tough times. And the moment when you start to appreciate that you too, you got to be humiliated a little bit. You got to take it. Right now, I find it's easy for people to skirt that. So discussions, long-form discussions, calm debate, that's gone.
Yeah.
Sensationalized. Let's have huge debates over flashy arguments that mean nothing.
Mean nothing.
Small talk versus real talk. And I just every once in a while, I find it gets to be long-winded.
I love real talk.
Yeah,
because that's substance, and that not only that, Kerwin Ray said another thing. He says a lot of good things. I listen to him every now and again on podcasting and things like that. And he said, "We never fail. We always learn or we grow."
Yeah, I agree. That's a beautiful thing.
And I like that because it's changed my perspective. It's changed how I look at adversity. It's changed how I look at failure. It's changed how I look at stress. It's changed how I look at obstacles that I have to overcome. It's changed how I look at insecurities. It's not that I've arrived at all those areas, but it's changed how I approach them. And that's what I find when I begin to approach them and not afraid of them, but confront them and learn from them and navigate through them. It changes who I am.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it.
I don't like ignoring stuff.
So I want to work through it. That's a dangerous game because you get into like, I need to A+. This thing that I'm not ignoring, I'm ignoring. So that's the B-.
Yes.
So that was a tool that I was taught actually in therapy. I didn't go to therapy long. I only had 3 sessions. Yeah. And I was so happy, I appreciated everything about it. And it's just the stigma around that is just gone. It was gone for me before. I was always willing to, but I needed it now. Yeah. And it was weird because you get like your debrief, your site clearing when you finish tours and you go through the military stuff and each rotation. But with this one, it was on my call, like I'm going to do this. And learning to settle for a B+, a B-, learning to settle for that was a very cool.
And be okay with that.
It was a cool tool to do that. So, and I still suck at it. It's just progression.
Because we're all in progress. We're still in process. We're still learning. We're still growing. We're still. So
you ever try? There's some places where it's weird, where it's like maybe that's unacceptable behavior. Maybe it's unacceptable in the workspace, which I don't think it should be. I think in the workspace, like I run 2 businesses, 2 small businesses of my own, and my partner and I in my one business are so chill that we wonder if we should be way richer. we're like, man, like, we got these huge jobs, we're doing so well, and we're like, I don't really know if we should do that. We should calm down a little bit because we could work ourselves to death. And we left our previous organization that we were with, big oil company, really good job, really great people company, to be honest. And when we left it, when we started our business, we were like, no, we're going to work for ourselves, and it's going to be good. It's going to be good enough. And so we make that call. We just talked about it like last week. We're like, yeah, huge job here. Like, well, when are you going to do it? Like $4,500 job. How long is it going to take? 6 hours. Holy crap. Like, when are you going to do it? Saturday. I don't think I want to do it. Maybe I'll do it next week. Or maybe I won't do it at all. Or maybe I'll hire it out. You know, and we started B-minusing a lot of behavior because he got hit very young by hard expectations. He was running an entire facility, 25 employees at 20 and 21, and just popped. And it really took him out. He did it for about 3 years. The expectation was high, and he just couldn't figure out how to say no. He's the passive version of me. We debate all the time. And he was the one, him and I really, really, really talked a lot about, because he started paying the piper early. Like at 22, you're talking every sign of drastic anxiety. He's got social anxiety, and he has to work through that issue all the time. And it took him a little bit to work through, and together as friends, we debate it, and it's nice because he's in long form discussion now.
At the end of the day, you know, if anything comes out of this conversation, which there's a lot of golden things that we've just talked about, there is light in the tunnel. There is. And if people can get that glimmer of hope, that there is light in the tunnel. Yes, there can be really dark, but there is light. When we learn through these experiences and become better as a result of them, that instills hope in other people as well. One thing I liked a lot about it is that it kind of becomes a habit. And I don't mean a habit to excel at. It's a passive skill that you learn and earn through your struggles, through your suffrage. It's important to struggle and suffer and persevere through things. It's far too easy now to dismiss, and people are coming to that too late now in life. You're reaching that on your second marriage, your third marriage. It's not because you're a bad person. No. It's just difficult to grow when you refuse to accept or challenge or face the storm. It's a difficult thing, and I don't blame you for it. It's easy. Yes, it is, It's so easy to do it, but humans tend to relate really well to the beast of burden behavior. And you tend to do your best under a load, under responsibility. And we had to learn the other way. You're constantly responsible. You have to learn to come off of it. So it just goes to show that there isn't necessarily a perfect answer to it. But I like that, though, because sometimes that's our pursuit. We want the perfect answer, and you're not going to get a perfect answer. Remove it. It's few and far between. It's few and far between. But you do get them. You have great days. You know, and absolutely. When my wife and I talk about it every once in a while, because she's so just inherently sweet. She doesn't need to, and she's so blissful in everything she does. It's the exact, like, I'm like seeking out threats or variables through the days, and I'm like, this is where I'm dealing with, this is the objective, and that's a passive skill. Sometimes that has been a pressure point in our relationship with my wife as well, because she's very like that. It's like, how can you see it that wonderful? Life isn't just like, So she's the one I don't want to. I want to be an A+ for her, but she loved me at a F-. Absolutely. And so for me, it's important. That's a big one for me. Because it's so close. To not always put an A+ pressure on my marriage, on my relationship. And she's the one teaching me that. And you know how she teaches me that?
by not doing a goddamn thing.
Because we're wired exact opposite. You do everything. You work and do everything.
She's like, I don't understand why this is a thing. And I'm, of course, revved.
Yep.
And she is just so inherently patient and sweet towards it that I'm learning. She's teaching me probably one of the greatest lessons. And if she ever sees this podcast, she's going to love it. She's going to be all over me. She's probably teaching me one of the greatest lessons I will ever learn. And it's going to take 30 years. I will be learning this. I will be trying to figure this out at like 55. And I'll be like, man, how did you do this? Because she thinks she did good by marrying me. And I've already seen, I'm looking at her going, I'm pretty sure I won this. I'm pretty sure I won the lotto here. So, I'm learning that lesson.
Something my wife said to me, and we were probably in it 24 years. We're 28, going on 29. She said this to me, and she said this to people. She never said it to me. She said it to people. And she's used it on our table talk that we have every Wednesday we do together. But she said something that I never registered. She said, I used to always wonder about Jeff. Why he was wired the way he was. Why he always was the way he was. And then she said something. She said, I've learned to appreciate how he's been made. Because there's an aspect of his life that I needed to break me out of my limits.
Yeah.
And I never seen it that way. Now, not to excuse, well, I'm this way, so that's the way it is. No, that's not a fair assessment, because there's always things that we learn and grow through our personalities and how we're wired and made. But that was an encouragement to me in the aspect like,
that's crazy.
I am not a problem person. I see things different. But what I've gained through my not and take life as it is, and I'm okay, I'm working, I learned that I find that I have more to give then.
I agree with you.
I have more to give 100%.
Then. 100%. Isn't it? And it's a little bit crazy when we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
How much you learn to appreciate your wife just that much more. You're like, I think I've been trying to figure it out. So we do a wolf or sheep conversation, right? Like there's wolves, there's sheeps.
Yep. I know.
Sheepdogs.
Yep.
Right. So I'm a sheepdog, and so on and so forth. We protect the sheep, which is the civilian population. But we don't exist without the sheep.
That's right.
It's not that we're more important than them. We're just willing to do that. Or maybe we're designed, we're skilled, warrior culture, or aggressive people. So some people would look at this entire thing we're doing here and be like, yeah, it's easy for you to say. Mm-hmm. The one thing I want people to know is that it was never. No. It was never easy.
It's easy. It's easy to come to conclusions like that when you don't know people's history and people's stories. I've written people off way too quickly. And then I heard their story. It's like,
well, you and I did it.
Oh yeah,
yeah. You and I did it when I first met you again, and years later, right? I was coaching your son in football, and I expressed it to you, and I think that was the first time I had ever acknowledged that I may have been having a hard time with something like that. And I said it to you, and you weren't ready at the time, and you dismissed it on me, and I was like, oh my god, like. This could have been like a brother in arms. This could have been somebody I could have talked with. Yeah. So I find that that's super hard. It's a super hard place to be, getting like that. And you get to put on an island. So you put, instead of like building bridges, build walls. Yep. I'm going to make this into
safer to build walls. People can look in.
Look at my 10-foot fortress that I built, Yeah, I hear you, man. That's crazy.
This has been great, Chris. I've just enjoyed how this conversation has gone in different directions and stuff like that. And the nice thing about, putting this on social media, and when we release it, people can take bits and pieces of it and go back to it and take bits and pieces of it, because there's so much a person can pull through, because I think really everybody can relate to expectations. They can relate to failing and not feeling they're good enough, and not knowing how to deal with anxiety. And we're not talking about combat anxiety. We're talking anxiety as a whole, learning to deal with what's in front of you. And when we feel we're equipped to deal with that, it pulls us in all kinds of different directions and puts things on us that never should be on us. And being able to say it's okay to struggle, it's okay to work through that, it's okay to not have all the answers. A big freedom for me is it's okay to not have the answer.
have found the most faith and the most support. One, it took me a little bit to understand that everybody also struggles with this. And it's not to water down or dismiss your behavior.
No.
Your problem is just, whatever. I've had to deal with worse.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just people protecting themselves saying that, right? Not everyone's equipped or ready to.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough. Like, I'd acknowledged that I was having some issues at some point in time. And I was lucky enough to have people that I was close to.
Yeah.
And as you get older, or as you have some really close friends or family members that you can find, sometimes it's cool to lean on them. You don't want to.
Yeah.
You feel like you're burdening them.
Yeah, that's right.
But I would ask you, just role reverse. I do it with my wife all the time. Put the shoe on the other foot.
Yeah.
Honey, if you came home and you had the day I had, I would be the first person giving you a foot rub. I want to talk to you about it, right? And your friends and your family, you'd be surprised. Your next door neighbor. You and I met each other forever ago, came back, met each other again, then you ended up basically marrying me and my wife
that's right,
for us, right? And like, sometimes you're surprised, but that's just you being ignorant.
Yeah.
Everyone suffers and everyone struggles. The important thing to understand is that is such a gift to struggle, to suffer, and to learn to work through it.
I love the way you communicate that, because what it does is it gives light at the tunnel. It gives hope.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
It's just a big lesson that you don't need to pass.
Yeah.
You can take whatever you want from it, like university without a grade. What do you want to take from this course? This course just happens to
Pressure is gone.
And so you just work your way through it. And sometimes what's really cool now is saying that to somebody. Yeah, no, I was just working through it. I kind of suck at it, but I'm just figuring it out.
And that opens an invitation, though, for someone else to go, okay.
Cool.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Someone said it's okay not to be okay. Not that you accepted all your weaknesses. It's okay to not be okay.
That's right.
Because you have to work through it. You're going to learn. You're going to learn to hit that wave the way it's supposed to be hit, and deal with your fears and your insecurities and all that kind of stuff. And for us, and I know my wife could testify too, our life is not the same. Our life has been transformed.
Amazing.
And how I've dealt with stress and how I deal with insecurities, all those type of stuff. And I never could used to have that conversation with my wife, because I figured she would never relate. You can never relate. I don't want to talk about it. It's like, yes, she can.
Yeah.
Her context is different.
That's right.
Mine isn't so much bigger and so much better and have a special shelf for it.
That's right.
Because emotions, everyone faces emotions, and it's whether it's here, the emotion is still there.
That's right.
And so when you acknowledge that I don't have a worse emotion than you do, no, it gives hope for other people to say. And not only that, but you acknowledge other people's emotions too.
That's right.
Hey, I understand that. I know that. And I think if we can get rid of that stigma, I think we had this conversation in my office right after my experience I had with the fireworks that went on. And I did not understand why because I've watched fireworks before.
Yeah.
I did not understand why all of a sudden this triggered something from military, how it triggered, and how all of a sudden my whole emotions got swept. And I felt myself going into a shell.
Oh, yeah.
And I recognized it was 8 minutes of constant bombardment. To me, that was bombardment.
Sure. Yeah.
You could feel the shock waves, everything. And automatic, I could feel like somebody's hurt, someone's damaged, who's done assessment, what's going on, and all that kind of stuff. And so, but I didn't stay there.
Yeah.
I reached out right away.
Yeah.
I reached out right away.
That's a great.
It was like 12:30.
Yeah.
And I knew you were probably sleeping. I just texted you, said, have you gone through these emotions and how have you navigated through it? If I wouldn't have done that, like, I couldn't sleep till 4 o'clock in the morning. I could not sleep. I could not. I wanted to go back to those grounds to make sure everything was okay.
Yeah.
And all that, all that kind of stuff, and shame and guilt and everything was flooding through. But by reaching out, because some of your experiences have been different than mine, but yet the emotions are the same.
Yeah.
And so when we can acknowledge other people in process and dealing with stress and dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the context of no work and what are we going to do, it brings validity to everybody as a person.
Yeah.
That you're important and we can navigate through. And I think that's how I think the biggest thing that we can leave this conversation is like I said, there's light at the tunnel. We've processed through. We're not all the way through in some areas, but we're learning tools so that when those situations come up, we're not going to be afraid. We're not going to hide. We're going to deal with it. We're going to expose it. We're not going to be threatened by it.
That's right.
And we're going to navigate through.
Sometimes you learn. What is cool is sometimes you learn to appreciate it for what it is. It's not so much a threat. Your body, your mind, you would literally have a physical reaction.
Yes, you do.
To it. You dump a ton of hormone, a ton of stress into yourself, and you think it's a threat.
Yeah.
Your body is telling you that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So what you get to do is train your body. It's like another level of it. That's that 10-year on 10-year, 10-year kind of joke I'm going with. But
that's right. Yeah.
I'm now thinking, man, what's the next thing going to be, right? Yeah. Maybe it's a teenager, right? I've got a kid on the way.
But it's not threatening you.
That's right. So
it's not threatening you. It's like, oh, there's another avenue of growth that's going to come into my life. And if we can begin to see it that way, that's like incredible.
The thing I get at the end of that is, which something I think everyone could take from these days, is being humble about it. Knowing that you're never going to be at the top of your game.
He's huge.
And you are.
Humility's huge.
And so, like that 16-year-old teenager that I'm going to run into of my own, right? That's never going to know this side necessarily of me. You know, it's not going to know, like, my dad did some crazy stuff.
That's right.
Holy crap, this guy. They're not going to be like, they don't care. They don't think I'm cool.
No.
But it's going to humble me. It might infuriate me or whatever, of course, and all the other.
We like those stories.
But that humility that comes with it is, right, this is the next.
Yeah.
This is the next part of this. It's not a threat. It's not something I need to eliminate. Sometimes it's just something I need to appreciate.
Yeah.
At the minimum, I recognize. Maybe progress. Maybe one day I'll perfect.
Absolutely.
I don't know, but it'll come.
But it's that journey.
That's right.
It's that journey. Thanks for a lot for taking your time just to view and glad you sat down here. We'll have to have some more conversation. I think this is fun a lot. It's therapeutic and very good because it's just solidifies a lot of things too. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate the fact that you took the time, and whether you're watching this at home in your car or in the office, filling yourself with some of these things, I hope it's helped you in some way. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to connecting with you again.